parenting styles. So now we're going to kind of talk into the part of what starts making us a parent. So that means, having a baby. So with that being said, we're going to talk about basically what happens during pregnancy, how pregnancy occurs, and then throughout the course of the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about kind of everything that a woman is potentially going to experience during a pregnancy. So this is kind of funny to look at. It's Boy Meets World, the original one way back in the day. But the teacher is asking Corey, can you tell us anything about ovulation, how pregnancy occurs? Though Corey Matthews' vocab is a little off, he's not entirely wrong with it. And he adds this fun little sarcasm at the end. He says, well, the man's got the sperm, the woman's got the egg. He's right so far. Now, once a month, an egg slides down the fallopian tube towards the uterus. He's pretty close on that. The first sperm to reach the egg wins. It gets a medal. It's born. You name him Corey. You push him out the door, and nothing makes sense for the rest of life. So that's his kind of fun take on it. And for the most part, he's not entirely wrong. So we're going to go into more details about that. So a couple things to keep in mind, just diving into pregnancy in the beginning. Pregnancy can result anytime that a couple has sexual intercourse while the woman is ovulating and sperm is present, because those are the two parts that you need to make a baby. So many methods of contraception may prevent pregnancy, but most do not prevent STIs or sexually transmitted infections or STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. Some additional testing or tracking may be used to increase the chances of becoming pregnant. So there are people out there that maybe they're having a hard time conceiving, which is the act of getting pregnant. And so they may track like the woman's cycle, her ovulation cycle, or they may see and do further testing to see what potentially is causing this infertility. And we're going to talk about infertility at the end. Number one thing I want you guys to keep in mind, remember that having a child is a lifetime commitment. It's no longer about you. Your focus should shift, and it should always be about them. Their needs are before your needs. So I want you guys to kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so do you know that we're going to start talking about body parts, and we're going to start talking about them using them correctly and using the proper terms for them as well. So the first thing that we're going to look at right over here to the right, we're going to see this picture pop up a few times. But this is the uterus right here. These are the fallopian tubes, not the fallopian tubes, but you've got the fallopian tubes on this side. You've got the fallopian tubes on this side. And then you've got two ovaries, which is one right here. That's actually attached to the side of the uterus. And then you've got another one right here that's attached to the other side as well. And then you've got the vagina right here. I'm sorry, not the vagina. The cervix is right here, and then the vagina is right down there. And then what actually most people mistake as the vagina is actually the vulva, which is the exterior part. The interior part itself is actually called the vagina. So the ovaries, which are these two little bad boys right here, one right there, one right there, they hold all the ova or ovum, aka the eggs, that a woman will ever have. So women are actually born with their eggs in their ovaries. It's not until they start hitting puberty that the body starts releasing those eggs, but they have them from the moment that they're born. So they are actually completely developed while the baby is still in the womb. So you've got your ovaries right here. The fallopian tube is a tube that connects the ovaries to the uterus. So it's actually not fully connected right here. These are like little finger-like projections that kind of house around the ovary. The ovary is connected right here on the side of the uterus, but it's not like if an egg is released, it's free floating in the body. It's always going to go up to the fallopian tube. So it's housed this way. And then as it makes its way through the uterus, which is right here, is the organ in a woman's body in which the baby develops. So if everything goes according to plan and conception happens and pregnancy occurs, the embryo will attach itself to the side of the uterus, also called the uterine lining or the uterine wall. And then technically it's 10 months, although we tend to only count it as 9 months because most women do not know they're pregnant until about the 5-week mark, 4 to 5 week mark, because they're waiting for the next cycle. The absence of a cycle could potentially mean that you're pregnant. So pregnancy begins and gender is determined at conception. Conception is when a sperm meets the egg. Okay. Women, your bodies determine how many babies there are going to be because of how many eggs you release. Men, your bodies determine the gender of the baby. So whatever, genetic coding is in the sperm and it meets the egg, that's what's going to happen. Each month, an egg called an ovum or an ova is released by the woman's ovaries. If you guys are seeing a pattern here, the ovum comes from the ovaries, and we call that whole part ovulation. All right, so these prefixes, they purposely all sound similar because they're all related to the same thing. It's something about the egg or the egg process. So ovums housed in the ovaries, when they release once a month, it's called ovulation. At the same time that the ovums are preparing to release and everything like that, the woman's body releases hormones that prepare the uterus in the event that the ovum is actually fertilized. So every month, a woman's body is preparing to get pregnant. It has the intentions to become pregnant, but if sperm is never present, then it won't become pregnant. And what we know that as is when your body's like, oh, okay, it's about 28 to 31 days. I've done all this, ovulations happen. The uterus is literally the perfect little house for everything to attach to. Okay, conception never occurs. I've now got to start all over again. And then the body will flesh that out, and they will end up having your period, which is basically your body like, okay, I got to start all over again. All right, well, then I'm going to get rid of all this excess stuff, and then I'm going to next month start building up a new supply. So again, kind of like we said, a woman builds up a supply of blood and nutrients in the uterus in case that conception takes place. When it doesn't happen, the body releases all that excess, and that's called your period. So the egg moves through the fallopian tube on its way to the uterus. Conception actually occurs in the fallopian tube. It does not occur in the uterus. It doesn't occur in the ovaries. It's going to occur in the tube itself. And that whole journey from the egg leaving the ovary to the egg getting to the uterus is about 2 to 3 days. That's about when conception will start happening, is within those 2 to 3 day windows. Ovulation takes place about 14 days before the next period. What people tend to get the misconception of is that you can have your period, count 14 days after it, which would be the halfway point to the next period, and boom, this is when I'm ovulating. This is when either I can choose to have a baby or, not, but this would be the prime time to be having a child, or a prime time for conception to happen. But women, we know that the body is not always regular. Your period may not always be 28 days apart. Sometimes it's 32 days apart. Sometimes it's 24 days apart. What we do know is that ovulation, though, is happening about 14 days. So it's 14 days before the next period. So if you're pretty regular, you can count those days. If you're irregular, if your period is irregular, then you're running a higher chance of getting pregnant at a time that you didn't think you could become pregnant. So when the egg reaches the uterus, one of two things is going to happen. If conception happened, the fertilized egg will implant itself on the uterine wall and then develop into a baby in 10 months' time. If conception does not happen, if sperm is never present, the egg will eventually disintegrate, and then it's flushed out of the body with the menstrual flow. So this picture that we saw earlier, this is showing conception happening. This is showing implantation. So ovary released the egg's traveling through. It's been a day, couple of days now. Okay, so the fallopian tube, the egg's right about here. The sperm comes up through here, finds it. Conception has now happened. The perfect scenario is that then it kind of comes down, and then boom, it implants on the side of the wall. Everything is great. Every now and then, it will actually implant on the side of the fallopian tube, and that is what we call an ectopic pregnancy. And we will get into further detail of that a little later on. But the goal is that it gets to the uterus and implants. What I want you guys to keep in mind is that the body actually switches between the left ovary and the right ovary on which releases. So that is the kind of interesting part behind it. So if you are missing an ovary, or if you had one removed, the other ovary will pick up the slack and will release an egg every month. Sometimes the ovaries are off and they both release an egg, sperm is present, and you get twins. But we'll get into all that a little bit later on. So, oh, look, even better picture. I forgot about this one. So the ovary came out here. The ovum came out here. Sperm is present. It found it. Boom. Conception is happening in this moment. And then another day or two will make its way and implant right here or on the other side, whatever it is. But it will implant right down here. So we talk about infertility. Options for infertile couples can include in vitro fertilization, also known as IVF. Basically, they take the parts that they need from dad, the parts they need from mom, they mix it in like a little dish, whatever it is. It's a lot of science. And then what they do is they will take that ovum, it includes ovum transfer, and they will basically take that fertilized egg and put it right back into mom. Adoption is also a option as well. Artificial insemination, where basically they take the man's sperm and then they inseminate the woman with it. They never take the egg from her, that gets to stay. And then they can also choose to use a surrogate. Infertility is the inability of a man or a woman to contribute to conception. Sometimes it's explained, sometimes it's not. Sometimes a woman's body just can't handle the pregnancy. Sometimes the man's sperm is just not doing what it's supposed to do. So a surrogate is essentially a substitute. So it's a woman who basically is saying like, hey, I will house the baby for you. So if possible, mom will take the, they'll use the mom's egg, they'll use dad's sperm, and they are literally just kind of borrowing the woman's uterus for 10 months. That doesn't happen. Sometimes the woman who's a surrogate, they could use her egg and then the man's sperm, and they would do essentially like IVF. And then that way they have a child. So your assignment real quick, it's just a little chart and a couple of questions on here. You guys are going to be able to type directly in here. I'm in presentation mode, so you can't see that at that moment, but you're going to use your notes of the internet to answer these questions. So tell me what these 4 parts are. They've all got their arrows on there. And then on the next slide, I want you to answer these 4 questions. Again, click on the boxes, start typing, but you need to do that in editing mode and not presentation mode. And that's it. It's pretty short. If you guys have any questions, you guys know to email me.